I was 25 years old when my life fell apart in one evening. Sometimes I look back and wonder if it was fate, if everything that happened was meant to push me toward where I eventually ended up. But at that moment, all I felt was rage burning in my chest and a heaviness that made it hard to breathe. The fight with my family had been brewing for months, maybe years. My father was a man of strict principles, and he believed I should follow in his footsteps. Steady work, discipline, the life he carved out of sweat and repetition. My mother, though softer, always stood behind him, her silence echoing his words. They wanted me to fit into a mold I never asked for, a life I couldn't see myself living. I wanted something else. I wanted to carve my own path, though I wasn't even sure what that path looked like. That night it all boiled over. It started with my father criticizing me for another rejection, some job interview I'd walked away from because it didn't feel right. He called me irresponsible, lazy, selfish. I snapped back, saying I wasn't going to chain myself to a life I hated just to make him proud. My mother tried to intervene, but her voice was drowned by ours. My father's words cut sharper than a blade. If you don't want to live by this family's values, then you don't belong in this house. The room fell silent. I stared at him, searching his face for a flicker of doubt, some sign that he didn't mean it. But his eyes were hard, unflinching. My mother looked away, tears trembling at the corners of her eyes, but no protest on her lips. My younger sister, standing at the doorway, didn't say a word. I realized then that they had all made their peace with the idea of me leaving. Something inside me cracked. I felt the sting of betrayal, but also a strange clarity. My chest hurt, my throat tightened, and I could barely keep my voice steady when I said, "Fine. If I don't belong here, then I'll go." I packed quickly, shoving clothes into a worn backpack. Every step I took felt heavier, as if the house itself was trying to hold me back, memories pressing against my shoulders. The walls I had grown up between suddenly seemed alien, like they belonged to strangers. My mother followed me to the door, but stopped short of touching me. "Please, don't do this," she whispered, but her plea felt hollow, fragile. My father stood behind her, arms crossed, jaw tight. He didn't move. He didn't stop me. When the door shut behind me, the night air hit like a wave of cold freedom. My heart pounded. I was angry, hurt, betrayed, but also strangely light. For the first time, there was nothing tying me down. No expectations. No lectures. Just me and the open world. But freedom has a bitter edge when you don't know where to go. I stood on the street, backpack slung over my shoulder, staring at the dark horizon. My friends had their own lives. I didn't want to show up on their doorsteps like a broken bird. I didn't have much money, barely enough for a few meals. My car sat in the driveway, but something inside me told me not to drive back into the city, not to look for shelter in the places I had always known. I didn't want comfort. I didn't want pity. I wanted something new, something raw and untouched. That's when the thought came, simple, reckless. The forest. The forest had always been there, a shadow on the edge of town. As a child, I'd wandered at its borders, listening to the whispers of wind through leaves, feeling the quiet power of it. I remembered thinking it was alive in a way the town never was. And now, cast out and unwanted, it felt like the only place that might accept me. So I walked. The pavement ended, replaced by gravel, then dirt. Streetlights disappeared behind me, swallowed by darkness. Only the stars lit my path, scattered across the sky like broken glass. With every step, I felt distance stretch between me and my family, as though the ties binding me had been cut. Anger carried me at first. Each stride a defiance, a vow that I didn't need them, that I would prove myself without their rules or approval. But as the night deepened and the trees grew closer, anger faded into something heavier. Doubt. Loneliness. The truth pressed against me. I had no plan. No destination. I was just a young man with nowhere to go, walking into the unknown. I stopped by the edge of the forest, staring at the dark wall of trees. They loomed tall, branches twisting against the night sky, roots curling into the earth like veins. Fear prickled at me, sharp and cold. What if I got lost? What if I never found my way out? What if this was the biggest mistake of my life? But then another voice rose inside me, softer but steadier. What if this is where I finally find myself? I stepped into shadows. The ground was uneven, littered with leaves and twigs that crunched under my boots. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, clean and sharp compared to the stale air of the house I'd left behind. For a while, the silence was comforting. The forest didn't judge me. It didn't demand anything. It simply existed, and in that existence, it made room for me. Hours passed. My legs ached. My shoulders burned from the weight of my pack. But I kept going. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe a clearing. Maybe a small village tucked deep in the trees. Maybe just a place where I could collapse and breathe. The confusion gnawed at me. I walked away from everything I knew, and yet I had no idea what lay ahead. Eventually, exhaustion won. I sank down onto a fallen log, my back against rough bark. My chest rose and fell heavily, sweat dampening my shirt despite the cool air. The forest stretched endless around me, whispering in the wind, and for the first time since leaving, I let the weight of it all settle on me. I was unwanted, alone, cast out like something disposable. The thought stung, but beneath it there was a spark, small, fragile, but real. For the first time, my life was mine. I didn't know where the path would lead, but I knew I couldn't go back. And so, under the blanket of stars and the endless hush of the trees, I decided, whatever awaited me in the wilderness, I would face it. The road stretched out in front of me, long and dusty, carrying me farther from the life I had left behind. The sun hung low in the sky, its light bleeding into shades of orange and red, casting the land in fire and shadow. Each step I took stirred up small clouds of dirt that clung to my boots and stung my throat. My legs were heavy, my backpack digging into my shoulders, but I pushed forward because stopping meant thinking too much. The farther I walked, the quieter the world became. At first, there had been the faint hum of cars on the highway, distant voices carried from houses I passed. But as the town slipped behind me, the sounds faded into stillness, broken only by the crunch of gravel beneath my feet and the steady rhythm of my breath. The silence pressed against me, foreign and unnerving. I wasn't used to this kind of quiet. My family's house had always been filled with noise, arguments, laughter, the television blaring in the background. Now, even my thoughts seemed too loud, bouncing inside my skull without distraction to drown them out. The land stretched wide, open fields on either side of the road, giving way to patches of forest. Trees lined the horizon, dark silhouettes against a fading sky. Their presence felt both comforting and intimidating, like guardians watching my every step. A breeze rustled through the grass, carrying with it the earthy scent of soil and pine, sharper than anything in the city. It reminded me that I was leaving one world behind and entering another. With every mile, my exhaustion deepened. My feet throbbed, and my shoulders ached from the weight I carried. But in a strange way, the physical pain was a relief. It matched the heaviness inside me. My body and my mind moved in the same rhythm, weary, burdened, yet determined. The ache was proof that I was still moving, still alive, still choosing to go forward even when everything behind me had fallen apart. Animals stirred in the distance. I caught glimpses of movement between trees. Deer darting through the brush, a rabbit pausing on the edge of the road before vanishing into tall grass. Birds circled above, their calls echoing faintly in the air. For a moment, I envied them, their freedom, their belonging in this wild place. I felt like an intruder, clumsy and uncertain, but also strangely drawn to their world. As the sun dipped below the horizon, shadows stretched long across the ground. Colors bled into darkness, and the temperature dropped quickly, the heat of the day replaced by a biting chill. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and glanced around, searching for a place to stop. The road behind me was gone, swallowed by night. The road ahead was endless, disappearing into the gloom. I stepped off the path and found a small clearing at the edge of the trees. The grass was damp with evening dew, and the earth was uneven, but it was enough. I dropped my backpack and sat down heavily, every muscle sighing in relief. The silence deepened here, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. For the first time since leaving home, I felt the enormity of it all pressing down on me. I was alone, completely, utterly alone. The thought hit harder in the darkness. No familiar voices, no walls to shelter me, no family. Even if they had turned their backs, they had always been there. Now, there was only me, the cold earth beneath my hands, and the endless night sky above. Fear crept in, sharp and sudden. What if something happened to me out here? What if I was lost forever, just another shadow swallowed by the woods? I lay back on the grass, staring up at the stars. They stretched across the sky in endless clusters, brilliant and indifferent. For a long time, I just watched them, letting their stillness quiet my racing thoughts. Somewhere in the vastness of that sky, my family was sleeping soundly in their beds. Somewhere, other lives were carrying on, bright kitchens, laughter, arguments, the hum of television sets. The world kept spinning, whether I was a part of it or not. But lying there, I felt something else stirring beneath the fear, a fragile sense of freedom. The night was mine. The stars belonged to no one. Out here, there were no rules, no expectations, no voices telling me who I should be. The forest didn't care if I failed or succeeded. The trees didn't care about my mistakes. The animals didn't judge me. For the first time, I was unshackled, not by choice maybe, but by circumstance. I breathed deeply, the air cool and sharp in my lungs. Yes, I was afraid. Yes, I was lost. But I was also independent. No one could take that from me now. I closed my eyes, listening to the forest whisper around me. My body ached, my heart felt raw, but a strange calm settled in. Tomorrow would be uncertain, maybe even dangerous. But tonight, beneath the stars, I let myself believe that I could survive this. That maybe, in the middle of all this loneliness, I was taking the first step toward a life I could finally call my own. By the third day of walking, my body felt like it was unraveling. My legs were heavy as stone, each step sending jolts of pain up through my calves. The strap of my backpack dug so deep into my shoulders it felt like part of me now. Hunger gnawed at my stomach, sharp and insistent, a reminder that I hadn't eaten more than a handful of berries and a few scraps since I left. I had thought the forest might provide, but it seemed intent on testing me instead. That evening, as the sun sank low, I could barely keep myself upright. The light draped itself across the horizon in hues of gold and rose, painting the sky with a beauty that mocked the ache in my body. I stumbled into a small clearing and collapsed against the base of a tree, its bark rough against my back. My chest heaved, and sweat clung cold to my skin. I tilted my head back, eyes tracing the fire-colored clouds as the day gave way to night. For the first time, I let myself think about giving up, not giving up on life, just on the endless walking. I thought maybe I could just sit here until something happened, until fate decided what to do with me. I felt small in that moment, swallowed by the enormity of the wilderness and the silence pressing in from all directions. And then I heard it, the steady, rhythmic sound of hooves striking the earth. I blinked, lifting my head, at first unsure if it was real or just another trick of my weary mind. But the sound grew clearer, closer. Through the trees, a figure emerged, a man on horseback, the fading light framing him in silhouette. My heart lurched. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, the sight of another human being was as startling as it was relieving. The horse slowed as it approached, its hooves crunching against the forest floor. The rider pulled gently on the reins, bringing the animal to a stop a few feet away from where I sat. He dismounted in one smooth motion, boots pressing into the soil with a quiet thud. He looked like something torn out another time, a cowboy, rugged and self-assured, with a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face. His clothes were worn, dust clinging to the fabric, but they fit him like he belonged to this land in a way I never could. Yet, when he stepped closer, I saw that his eyes weren't hard like my father's had been. They were curious, steady, touched with kindness. "You all right there, son?" he asked, his voice low and even. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat felt dry, my pride wrestling with my need. I wanted to say I was fine, to keep my walls up, but the truth was written all over me, my hollow cheeks, the slump of my shoulders, the way I clutched my backpack like it was all I had left. I don't know, I admitted, my voice breaking more than I wanted it to. He studied me for a long second, then crouched down so we were eye level. Been out here long? 3 days, I said. Maybe more. I lost track. He nodded slowly, as if that explained everything. His eyes softened, and he pulled a flask from his saddlebag, holding out to me. Here, drink. The cool metal pressed into my palm, and I drank greedily, water spilling down my chin as it hit my parched throat. It was the best thing I'd tasted in days. When I finally lowered the flask, I muttered a hoarse, "Thank you. You look like you could use more than just water," he said. He stood and went back to his horse, pulling out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside were thick slices of bread and dried meat. The smell alone nearly undid me. I hesitated, but my hunger won, and I ate. Each bite grounded me back into the world. As I chewed, he leaned against the tree across from me, arms crossed casually, though his eyes never left me. "What brings you out here?" he asked finally. The question lingered in the air, heavy. I could have lied, said I was traveling or just out for adventure, but something about him, the way he had given without asking anything in return, made me want to tell the truth. "My family," I said slowly. "We fought. They didn't want me anymore. So I left." The words burned, but speaking them out loud also freed me. His face didn't twist with judgment the way I feared it might. Instead, he nodded, like he understood something deeper than I had spoken. "That's a hard road to walk," he said. "Harder when you walk it alone." I stared at him, surprised at how much those words mattered. Nobody had ever said it like that. Not as an insult, not as pity, but as a truth. I didn't know where else to go. I admitted. My voice was low, almost a whisper. I thought, maybe out here I could find something. Maybe work in a village. Maybe just figure out who I am without them. He looked at me for a long moment. Then a small smile touched his lips, not the kind that mocked, but the kind that eased a burden. "Well," he said, "you found me." Something in the way he said it made warmth stir in my chest. He extended his hand. "Come on. You don't look like you'll last another night out here. I've got food, a roof, and a spare bed. You can stay, at least until you got your feet under you." I hesitated, glancing at his hand, at the horse behind him, at the forest around us. Trust didn't come easy after what I'd been through, but the exhaustion in my bones left little room for pride, and the kindness in his eyes spoke louder than any doubt. Slowly, I reached out and took his hand. His grip was firm, grounding. He pulled me up with ease, steadying me when my knees wobbled. For the first time since leaving home, I felt like maybe I didn't have to carry this alone. As we walked toward his horse, he glanced at me again. "Name's Cole," he said. I gave him mine, the sound of it foreign on my own tongue after so much silence. Cole helped me onto the horse, climbing up behind me with practiced ease. The animal shifted beneath us, strong and sure-footed, carrying us out of clearing and onto a path I hadn't seen before. The last light of the sun flickered through the trees, bathing us in fading gold as the forest swallowed us whole. I leaned back slightly, the steady rhythm of the horse's gait soothing my tired body. For the first time in days, I let myself breathe. Relief washed over me, not just from the water or the food, but from something deeper. I wasn't alone anymore. And though I didn't know it yet, that moment, when a stranger stopped in the fading light and chose to care, was the beginning of everything. The ride to Cole's home felt longer than it probably was, but my exhaustion turned every minute into an eternity. By the time the trees thinned and a small ranch came into view, the night had already swallowed the last colors of the sunset. A wooden fence stretched across the property, enclosing a modest stable and a wide stretch of land where tall grass swayed gently in the evening breeze. Beyond it stood a house, not large or grand, but solid and welcoming, its windows glowing with a faint amber of lamplight. The horse slowed to a steady walk as we approached. Cole dismounted first, his movements easy, practiced, like the rhythm of a man who belonged to the land. He reached up to help me down, steadying me again when my legs nearly gave out. "Come on," he said softly, guiding me toward the house. "You'll rest easier inside." The front porch creaked under our weight as we stepped up. When he opened the door, a wash of warm light spilled out, carrying with it the faint smell of wood smoke and something savory lingering from earlier in the evening. Compared to forest, the inside felt like stepping into another world. The walls were wooden, weathered but polished by years of care. A stone fireplace crackled in the main room, casting a soft glow over a table, 2 chairs, and a simple couch. Everything about the space was modest, yet there was a comfort in it, a lived-in kind of warmth that reminded me of what home should have felt like, but never truly did. "Sit," Cole said, nodding toward the table. "I'll get you something to eat." I lowered myself into one of the chairs, the wood sturdy beneath me, and watched as he moved about the kitchen area. He wasn't rushed, but there was an ease to his actions, as if he had done this routine countless times. He pulled bread from a tin, sliced cheese, and stirred something in a pot over the fire. The smell alone made my stomach twist with hunger. When he finally placed the food in front of me, I had to force myself not to devour it too quickly. Thick stew filled the bowl, steaming and rich, with chunks of vegetables and tender pieces of meat. Beside it sat a plate of bread, still warm from being near the fire. "Eat," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "There's plenty more." I didn't need telling twice. The first spoonful was like life itself pouring back into me. Flavor exploded on my tongue, heavy and comforting, chasing away the emptiness that had been clawing at me for days. I closed my eyes briefly, savoring it, then tore into the bread, dipping it into the stew. Every bite eased a part of me that had been knotted tight with fear and hunger. Cole didn't speak much as I ate, and I was grateful for it. He simply sat there, sipping from a mug, watching with quiet satisfaction as I filled myself. The fire popped in the hearth, shadows dancing across the walls, and the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was easy, natural, the kind of silence that didn't demand to be filled. When I finally slowed, leaning back in the chair with a full stomach, Cole tilted his head slightly. "Better?" I let out a breath, almost a laugh. "Better doesn't even cover it. Thank you for all of this." He shrugged, though there was warmth in his eyes. "No one should go hungry if I can help it." I studied him for a moment, taking the lines of his face, the rugged wear of his clothes, the way he sat like a man comfortable in his own skin, but also accustomed to solitude. He looked strong, yes, but there was something softer beneath that strength, a quietness, maybe even a kind of loneliness that mirrored my own. "You live out here alone?" I asked. He nodded, setting his mug down. "Been a few years now. No family nearby, no one waiting on me. Just me, the land, and the horses." His words lingered in the air, and I felt them settle deep inside me. Alone, that was the part that struck hardest. He said it plainly, without bitterness, but I wondered how many nights he had sat at this very table, eating in silence with only the fire for company. "I know the feeling," I said quietly. His gaze flicked to mine, and for a moment, neither of us looked away. Something unspoken passed between us, an acknowledgement, maybe even recognition. We were 2 people cut from different lives, yet carrying the same weight, the need for connection, for a place to belong. The fire burned lower, its warmth filling the room. My eyelids grew heavy, and Cole must have noticed because he stood and gestured toward a small room down the hall. "There's a spare bed in there. It's not much, but it's yours for the night. Get some rest." I hesitated, and used to such generosity, but the exhaustion in my body made the decision for me. "Thank you," I said again, my voice soft. As I lay down in the small, simple bed, the mattress rougher than the one I had left behind at home, I felt something I hadn't in days. Safety, not because the walls were thick or the locks were strong, but because someone had chosen to care. The last thing I saw before sleep claimed me was the flicker of firelight spilling to the doorway and the silhouette of Cole moving quietly through the house. For the first time since leaving home, I closed my eyes without fear. The spare bed was warm enough, the quilt rough against my skin, but carrying the faint smell of cedar. Yet even with my body begging for sleep, my mind would not quiet. Shadows from the fire in the other room spilled faintly across the floorboards, flickering with each gust of wind outside. I stared at them for what felt like an hour, before finally giving up. Pushing the quilt aside, I padded quietly into the main room. The fire was still alive, though lower now, casting the room in a soft amber glow. Cole sat in his chair, boots off, long legs stretched out toward the hearth. He didn't startle when I entered. Maybe he'd heard me coming. Maybe he had known all along I wouldn't be able to sleep. "Couldn't rest?" he asked, his voice low, deep enough that it blended with the crackle of the fire. I shook my head, sinking onto the couch across from him. Too much noise in here. I tapped my temple. He gave a half-smile. "Yeah, nights can be the loudest." For a while we didn't speak. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable, but it felt weighted, as though both of us carried stories pressing against our chests, waiting for a crack to escape. Finally, I exhaled and let mine out. "My family doesn't want me," I said softly, surprising even myself with the bluntness. Cole's eyes flicked toward me, steady, patient, not pushing. The firelight threw shadows across his face, highlighting the lines of a man who'd heard 100 hard stories before, but was willing to hear one more. They said I was a burden, that I wasn't enough, not good enough, not strong enough, not anything enough. My voice wavered, but I kept going. When I left, it wasn't just to get away. It was because I couldn't stay in a place where every look reminded me of how much I'd failed them. Cole leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. He didn't interrupt, didn't question, just listened, and that, more than anything, loosened the knot inside me. I thought if I left, maybe I'd find something out here. Maybe I'd become the kind of person they could be proud of. But most days I just feel lost, like I'm chasing something that doesn't exist. My voice broke then, just enough to betray the ache I usually try to bury. For a long moment, Cole didn't say anything. Then, with a slow breath, he spoke. "You're not the only one who knows that feeling." I lifted my gaze, and in his eyes, I saw a depth I hadn't noticed before. A quiet well of grief. "I had someone once," he began. His voice wasn't rushed. It came like water drawn from a deep place, heavy, deliberate. "Years back. She was good, gentle in a way that made the world softer. I thought we'd spend forever together." He paused, jaw tightening slightly. "But forever's a lie out here. One winter, sickness came through fast, and by spring, she was gone." The fire popped, filling the silence that followed. "I stayed on the ranch," he continued, "but after that, it wasn't the same. The days got longer, the nights quieter. Folks came and went, but no one stayed. After a while, I stopped expecting anyone to." His words settled over me like a heavy blanket. Loneliness, his mind, it was the same fabric, just worn in different places. I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," I said, though the words felt too small. Cole gave a faint shrug, though his eyes never left the fire. "Life doesn't ask permission before it takes. But the emptiness it leaves behind, that's the part that lingers." The room went quiet again, but now it was different. Not the silence of strangers, but of two people holding pieces of each other's sorrow. The weight wasn't gone, but it wasn't just mine anymore. I leaned back against the couch, staring into flames. My throat felt raw, but lighter too. It helps, I admitted, just saying out loud, having someone hear it. "That's because we're not meant to carry it all alone," Cole said gently. I turned toward him, and our eyes met. His were steady, unflinching, yet softer now, like the fire had melted something in him too. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. The kind of look that speaks louder than words, that says, "I see you. I understand." He shifted slightly, then reached across the small space between us, laying a callous hand on my shoulder. It wasn't firm, just steady, an anchor in the storm. The heat of it spread through me, quieting the tremor in my chest. "You're not broken," he said, his voice low. "You're just searching. Same as me." I blinked hard, tears stinging but not falling. His touch, his words, they cracked something open in me I hadn't realized I'd been protecting. All my life, I had wanted someone to understand, to look at me without judgment, without expectation. And here, in the quiet of a stranger's home, I finally felt it. I nodded slowly, unable to trust my voice. He didn't press. His hand stayed for a moment longer, warm and grounding, before he pulled back. The absence of it was sharp, but the imprint lingered. Neither of us spoke for a while after that. The fire burned lower, shadows lengthening. the air filled only with the soft hum of crickets outside. But something had shifted. The walls between us had thinned, replaced by something fragile but real. At last, Cole stood, stretching slightly. "You should try to rest," he said, though his voice carried a softness now I hadn't before. I nodded, but I didn't move right away. I stayed on the couch, watching the fire, feeling the echo of his hand on my shoulder. My chest still ached, but for the first time, it wasn't the hollow ache of emptiness. It was the ache of something beginning to heal. When I finally returned to the small bed, the quiet followed me, but it was no longer heavy. It was companionable, even in his absence. I lay down, staring at the ceiling beams until sleep pulled me under. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I dreamed of belonging not to a place, but to the possibility of being truly seen. The morning sunlight slipped gently through the thin curtains of the small ranch house, casting golden streaks across the wooden floor. I stirred awake slowly, not with the heaviness of the nights before, but with a surprising calm, as though the storm that chased me out of my family's home had finally lost its grip. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a stranger to the world. When I stepped outside, the air smelled of grass and horses, the kind of scent that spoke of earth and life and work. The cowboy was already outside, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and boots dusted from the ground. He turned when he heard the door creak and smiled, an easy, quiet smile that seemed to say, "I'm glad you're here." "Morning," he said simply. I nodded, feeling a little shy, but he handed me a mug of coffee, steam curling upward. It wasn't much, but that warmth in my hands felt like a gift. We didn't talk much at first. We didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was companionable. Soon, he asked if I'd help him with the chores. I agreed, eager to repay even a fraction of the kindness he'd shown me. Together, we fed the horses, filling their troughs and brushing down their coats. At one point, one of the horses nudged me so hard I nearly stumbled into the hay. He laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that filled the air and warmed my chest. I laughed too, the sound surprising me with how light it felt. We fixed a fence together, hammering nails and holding planks in place. It was simple work, but side by side, it felt meaningful. There was a rhythm to it, a quiet partnership forming, without either of us naming it. When our hands brushed as we passed tools back and forth, neither of us pulled away. By midday, sweat clung to my skin and the sun beat down hard, but instead of exhaustion, I felt alive. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something, even if it was small, even if it was just helping him with his ranch. It was more than I had felt like I belonged anywhere else. As we sat on the porch afterward, sharing a simple meal, our conversation drifted easily about the land, the weather, the things we both wanted out of life. It struck me that we weren't strangers anymore. Somehow, in the space of a single day, we had moved from two lonely souls searching for somewhere to fit, to two people who understood one another without needing many words. There was no grand declaration, no sudden spark of lightning. It was quieter than that, steadier. A silent understanding grew between us as the day wore on, as though both of us recognized that what we'd been searching for wasn't just shelter or food or work. It was each other. When he looked at me across the porch, eyes steady and kind, I felt it fully. The comfort of finally finding home, not in a place, but in a person. And in that moment, I knew we were no longer just companions. We were partners, in every sense that mattered. The evening fell soft and quiet, the kind of stillness where every sound seemed to carry, a distant horse whinnying, the creak of the porch boards under our boots, the hush of wind through the grass. We sat side by side, mugs of coffee cooling in our hands, watching the last edge of the sun dip beneath the horizon. I had been on this ranch only a handful of days, yet it felt as if my soul had lived here forever. The cowboy leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. His voice was steady, though I could hear the weight behind it. "I've been thinking," he said, eyes fixed on the land instead of me. "You don't have to keep walking anymore. You could stay here with me." The words hit me harder than I expected. For a long moment, I couldn't answer. My whole life, I'd been running from rejection, from the ache of never belonging. And now, here was someone offering me a place, not out of obligation or pity, but out of choice. My throat tightened. When I finally looked at him, he met my gaze without flinching. His eyes carried both hope and fear, the kind you only feel when you've risked showing your heart. "I don't want to go anywhere else," I admitted quietly. The truth spilled out before I could think. Out there I had nothing. But here with you, it feels like everything I've been searching for. His hand brushed against mine, tentative at first, then steady when I didn't pull away. That simple touch said more than either of us could with words. We sat like that for a long while, hands joined, the silence between us no longer empty but full of the promise of something new. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of shared life. Morning chores, shared laughter, meals by the firelight. Each task we did together stitched another thread into the fabric of what we were becoming. It wasn't just convenience or gratitude. It was partnership, deepening into something we both knew could not be ignored. One night, as we sat under the wide, star-filled sky, he turned to me with a softness I hadn't seen before. "I don't want us to be just passing time together," he said. "I want this to be real. I want you to be my partner in every way. Will you marry me?" My breath caught. I thought about the boy who had walked away from his family with nothing but hurt and loneliness in his chest. I thought about the countless miles of dust and silence that had carried me here. And now here I was, being offered not just a roof, not just companionship, but love, steady and unshakable. "Yes," I whispered, my voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I will." In that moment, the ranch wasn't just a stranger's home anymore. It was ours. The land, the horses, the worn wooden porch, the quiet nights by the fire. They were all part of the life we were choosing together. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight of loneliness lift, replaced by something solid and warm. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were building, choosing love over emptiness, choosing each other. And from that choice, a new beginning was born. The day of our wedding dawned clear and bright, the sky an endless sweep of blue. The air smelled of wildflowers and freshly cut hay, and the little chapel stood at the edge of the fields like something out of a dream. We had chosen to keep it simple, just a gathering of neighbors, ranch hands, and a handful of friends who had become like family. No grand decorations, no elaborate fanfare, only the quiet beauty of the land and the sincerity of two people who had found each other against all odds. I stood at the front, heart hammering as he walked down the aisle toward me. He wasn't dressed in finery, just a crisp white shirt, worn boots polished for the occasion, and a hat in his hands. Yet to me, he looked like everything I had ever prayed for, but never dared to believe could be real. His smile, soft and steady, told me he felt the same. When we spoke our vows, the world seemed to fall away. His voice was low but firm as he promised, "I'll walk beside you through every season, every storm. You'll never be alone again." My own voice shook with tears, but the words came from a place deeper than fear. "You are my home, my safe place. I choose you, today and every day to come." We didn't need a preacher's long sermon or 100 witnesses to make it holy. The vows themselves were enough, sacred in their simplicity. Hands clasped, eyes locked. We sealed them with a kiss that carried the weight of all the lonely years behind us and the promise of a shared life ahead. Afterward, the yard outside filled with laughter and music. A fiddle played while children ran barefoot through grass, and tables sagged under the weight of pies, stews, and cornbread brought by every neighbor who had come to celebrate. No one cared that the decorations were wildflowers in mason jars, or that the cake leaned slightly to one side. What mattered was joy, spilling out in every laugh, every toast, every clap on the back. I noticed in a quiet corner 1 or 2 familiar faces from my past. Family who had once turned me away, but now stood watching with softened eyes. We didn't exchange words that day, but their presence felt like a silent step toward reconciliation. Whether or not those bridges were ever fully rebuilt, it didn't matter. I had already found my chosen family here, among these people and beside this man. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of gold and rose, we stole a moment away from the crowd. Sitting together on the porch, hand in hand, I whispered, "I never thought I'd end up here. From rejection to wilderness to this." He squeezed my hand gently, his eyes reflecting the glow of the setting sun. "Home isn't where you're born," he said softly, echoing what I had been thinking. "It's where you're truly loved." Tears pricked my eyes, but they were no longer tears of sorrow. They were the sweet kind, the kind that come when you know you found exactly where you're meant to be. I leaned against him, the sound of laughter still drifting from the yard, and felt the steady beat of his heart beneath my cheek. The boy who had once walked dusty roads with nothing but pain in his chest had found his ending here. Not an end, but a forever beginning. With love beside me and hope ahead, I finally belonged. And that was the happiest ending I could ever have dreamed of.